There is an island in the middle of the Atlantic with no rivers. Not a single one that runs all year. No lakes. No streams you can count on. Barely a couple 100 millimeters of rain in a year, and most of that vanishes back into the sky before anyone can catch it. And yet, high up on the ridges, there are people filling tanks with clean, cold drinking water. No well beneath them. No pump. No pipe from a reservoir. No electricity of any kind. Just a tall wall of net standing in the wind. They are not pulling the water up from the ground. They are pulling it out of the air. Think about the last glass of water you drank. It came from a tap without a second thought. A river dammed somewhere far away. A treatment plant, a network of pipes, all of it invisible and completely certain. You have probably never once wondered whether the water would be there. Now take all of it away. No river to dam, no rain worth catching, nothing under the ground worth pumping to the surface. That is the hand these islands were dealt, out here alone in the Atlantic. And instead of folding, they did something almost nobody else on Earth had thought to do. You would call that impossible. Water does not just appear. And for most of human history, on an island this dry, it did not. Drought here has meant famine. It has emptied whole villages and pushed generations onto boats to look for a wetter life somewhere else. Water has been this country's oldest enemy. So how do you beat an enemy like that with a piece of mesh and no power at all? The answer is one of the most quietly brilliant things people have ever done with almost nothing. And once you see how it works, you will start looking at fog completely differently. This is Cape Verde, 10 islands scattered off the coast of West Africa, a country that has spent its entire existence learning how to find water where there is none. The easy answer is the one you are already thinking. Just dig a well, pipe it in, drill down until you hit groundwater. And in some places, they do. But this is volcanic rock in the middle of the ocean, with hardly any rain to soak in and refill what you take out. The springs are few and they run thin. Drilling is expensive, and there is only so much down there to reach. Trucking water up a mountain, village by village, is slow, costly, and never enough. For a long time, that was the whole story. You took what little the ground gave you, and you rationed the rest. Until someone looked up at the gray clouds sliding across the peaks almost every morning and asked a strange question. What if the water we need is not under our feet at all? What if it is already here, drifting right through the village, and we simply have no way to hold it? If watching people outsmart an impossible land is the kind of thing you are here for, subscribe. There is a lot more of it coming. Here is the first clue, and it starts with the wind. Cape Verde sits directly in the path of the trade winds. Steady currents of air that sweep in off the Atlantic, heavy with moisture from thousands of miles of open ocean. When that wet air hits the tall islands, it has nowhere to go but up. It climbs the slopes, it cools as it rises, and the moisture it carries condenses into fog. Thick, wet fog, rolling over the high ridges, day after day. And here is the cruel joke of this place. The same corner of the world that sends that wet ocean air also sends its opposite. Hot, dry, dust-laden wind blowing straight off the Sahara, which bakes the low ground and turns the flats to near desert. Cape Verde sits trapped between two extremes, an ocean full of water it cannot drink, and a sky full of dust it cannot use. For most of its history, that trap defined the country. The rain would fail, the crops would die, and people would starve or leave. To find drinking water hanging in the fog was not a science project. It was a way to break a curse that had haunted these islands for centuries. And that curse had a body count. In the worst droughts of the past, when the rain simply failed for year after year, tens of thousands of people on these islands starved, and countless more climbed onto boats and left for good. To this day, there are more Cape Verdeans living abroad than on the islands themselves. A whole nation scattered across the world by thirst. So when someone finally worked out how to wring water from a passing cloud, it was not a clever party trick. It was the difference between staying and disappearing. That fog is full of water. Every cubic meter of it holds thousands of tiny droplets, far too small and too light to fall as rain. They just hang there and drift and blow straight past you. For all of history, that water was completely useless. You could stand inside a cloud, soaked and thirsty at the same time. And then came the net. It sounds almost too simple to work. On the ridgelines, where the fog is thickest, they raise large panels of fine mesh. The same kind of plastic netting you might see around a construction site, stretched tight between two posts and turned to face the wind head-on. That is it. That is the machine. Stand on that ridge at dawn and you would barely see it working. The fog drifts in, gray and silent, and the nets just stand there, dripping. There is no hum, no motor, no sign that anything is happening at all. And yet, drop by invisible drop, the tanks below are filling. It is the quietest machine you will ever see. One with no moving parts, powered entirely by weather. Watch what happens when the fog rolls through. The wind drives those microscopic droplets straight into the mesh, and the fibers catch them. One droplet, then 100, then 1,000,000, clinging to the threads. As more arrive, they touch, they merge, they grow heavier, until they are too heavy to hang on. And then they do the only thing they can. They run downward. Gravity takes over from there. The water slides down the net into a gutter along the bottom, and from the gutter it flows through a simple pipe into a tank or a cistern waiting below. No electricity, no pump, no moving parts to brake. Nothing about it plugs in, and nothing about it burns fuel. The wind delivers the water, and gravity collects it. The whole thing runs on nothing but weather and slope. In one place, a mountain area called Serra Malagueta, this is not an experiment. It is how people actually get water. They put up a couple hundred square meters of this netting back in 2005, and it has been feeding the community ever since. Because even where there is some rain, the springs were never enough. On a good, foggy day, a single stretch of net can pull hundreds of liters of clean water straight out of the air. Water that, minutes earlier, was just mist blowing past on its way to nowhere. And it changes what a day even looks like. Instead of walking to a thinning spring or waiting for a water truck that may or may not come, families can watch a tank fill on its own, quietly, whenever the fog rolls in. In the misty season, the nets run generously. In the dry months, the flow thins, and every liter is counted again. But the principle never fails, because it asks almost nothing of anyone. It does not need a fuel delivery, or a spare part, or a trained engineer to keep it alive. It just needs the wind to blow, which, on these ridges, it almost always does. Think about what that really means. These people did not find a new spring. They did not dig deeper or pump harder. They looked at the exact thing that made their island so dry, the endless wind sweeping the moisture away, and they turned it into the thing that gives them water. The wind that dries the land is also the wind that carries its rivers, invisible, overhead. They just built something to reach up and hold on. It is such a simple idea that it sounds like a joke until you watch it work. No pump, no power bill, no permission needed from anyone. Just a wall of nets standing in the right place, doing nothing at all, while the water arrives on its own. The genius was never in building something complicated. It was in noticing that the water had been there the whole time and daring to reach for it. But the fog does not fall everywhere. And this is where Cape Verde splits into two completely different worlds. Because catching fog only works if you have mountains high enough to make it. And not all of these islands do. The eastern ones. The flat, sandy islands like Sal and Boa Vista, the ones the tourists fly into for the beaches, barely rise above the sea. There are no high ridges to force the wind upward, so there is no fog belt to catch. And with almost no groundwater beneath them either, they cannot dig their way out of the problem the way the mountain islands sometimes can. So they had to find water somewhere else, and they landed on the boldest source of all. They are surrounded by an entire ocean, salt water, undrinkable, stretching to the horizon in every direction. The very thing that makes an island an island. And on the flat islands of Cape Verde, that ocean is now the tap. They take the sea, and they turn it into drinking water. The one island drinks the fog. The other drinks the sea. If that isn't worth a subscribe, I don't know what is. And it genuinely helps the channel keep going. The process is called desalination, and it is the opposite of the fog net in almost every way. Where the net is silent and free, this is loud and hungry. Seawater is forced under enormous pressure through membranes so fine that the water molecules squeeze through and the salt is left behind. What comes out the other side is fresh, drinkable water, pulled straight from the Atlantic. It works. In fact, it now supplies the large majority of the country's drinking water. By most accounts, around 80% or more of what comes out of the taps in Cape Verde was seawater a short time before. An entire nation drinking the ocean. And it is no accident which islands went this way. The flat eastern islands are also the tourist islands. The ones with the white beaches and the resorts, where hundreds of thousands of visitors arrive every year expecting a pool to swim in and a shower that runs hot. Almost every drop of that began as seawater, pushed through a filter and paid for in fuel. In many places, the resorts get the cleanest, most reliable supply, while the local neighborhoods around them make do with less. Water here is not only scarce, it is an industry, and sometimes a dividing line. Manufactured on one side of a wall, rationed on the other. But it comes at a price, and the price is the whole point. Squeezing salt out of seawater takes an enormous amount of energy, and on these islands that energy mostly comes from burning diesel, fuel that has to be shipped in across that same ocean. The result is some of the most expensive water anywhere in Africa, costing several euros for every cubic meter before a single drop reaches a home. On the flat islands, water does not fall from the sky, and it does not rise from the ground. It is manufactured at real cost every single day. There is a strange loop hidden in that. To pull fresh water out of the sea, they burn diesel, and that diesel arrives by ship across the very same sea. They are crossing the ocean to buy the fuel to turn the ocean into something they can drink. It works. It keeps hundreds of thousands of people and their taps alive. But it is the opposite of the net on the ridge in every way that counts. Loud instead of silent, bought instead of caught, burning instead of free. So here is the strange shape of this country. Two islands, side by side in the same ocean, solving the same deadly problem in two completely opposite ways. On the mountains, they hang a net in the wind and let gravity do the rest, for almost nothing. On the flats, they build a plant, burn fuel, and force the sea through a filter, for a price among the highest on the continent. One reaches up for the water in the air. The other reaches down for the water in the sea. Neither of them has the easy option the rest of us take for granted. A river, a lake, rain you can rely on. And that is the real lesson buried in all of this. Cape Verde did not get more water. The rain did not increase. The rivers did not appear. What changed is where they were willing to look. They stopped accepting that a dry land is an empty land. They found water in the fog that everyone else let blow past, and in the sea that everyone else called useless. They matched each place to the only source it could reach, and they built the simplest possible thing to reach it. And there is something in that worth taking with you, even if you have never once worried where your next glass of water will come from. The people of these islands did not wait for the world to hand them a river. They studied what they actually had: a wind, a fog, a sea, and they asked what each one could be made to surrender. That is not really a lesson about water at all. It is a way of looking at a problem that seems completely closed and finding the one door nobody else bothered to try. The fog net, especially, is the kind of idea that spreads. It is cheap, it is low-tech, it needs no grid and no engineer to keep it running. And that is exactly why the same nets are now going up in other thirsty corners of the world, in the deserts of Chile, in the dry mountains of Morocco and Peru, anywhere the wind carries fog past people who need a drink. A solution born on a forgotten island in the Atlantic, quietly teaching the rest of the world how to harvest the sky. And that is the real gift buried in all of this. You do not have to live on a dry island to use it. Anywhere fog rolls past, a coastal desert, a bare mountain, a farm the rain forgot, a wall of cheap mesh with a trough beneath it will pull water straight out of the air for free for as long as the wind blows. The people of Cape Verde did not just solve their own thirst. They wrote a recipe the whole dry world can copy. Most of it still has not noticed, and it changes how you hear the word impossible. We use it to mean a door that is locked. But on these islands, impossible only ever meant a door nobody had tried. There was always water here. In the fog that soaked them and blew past, in the sea that surrounded them on every side. The water was never missing. What was missing was the right thing to hold it. The scarcity was real, but so was the water, hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone stubborn enough to go and take it. So this was never really a story about fog or about a piece of net. It is a story about what happens when people simply refuse to accept the word impossible. Anyone can survive where there is water. It takes something else entirely to look at a place with no rivers, no lakes, and no rain, and decide there is water here anyway. In the air, in the sea, in the last places. Anyone thought to look. They did not conquer the scarcity. They outthought it. And they did it with mesh and pressure and a refusal to leave a land that, by every measure, should not be able to keep them alive. Which leaves one last impossible question. If it takes this much invention just to find enough water to drink, nets on the ridges, the ocean run through filters, every liter fought for, then how, on an island this dry, do these people manage to grow anything to eat at all? Subscribe, and that is exactly where we are going next. How a country that can barely water itself still finds a way to feed itself.